Welcome to Fantasy or Reality, the GPP. Whatever road you took to get here doesn't matter. What matters is you're here. And my hope is that we all can help one another in this journey.
Hello again, friends. Welcome back. My name is Steve, and I used to have a gambling problem. The last time I placed a bet was May 2nd of 2021, so I'm over a year and a half away from it at this point. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about how we can identify if we have a gambling problem. So if you've ever asked yourself, do I have a gambling problem? Does my family member have a gambling problem? I'm kind of going to go over what I did during my gambling days, how I realized it was an issue, um, and how I kind of came to terms with that when it all eventually came out. Maybe you have someone in your life that you think is gambling too much or you think has an issue, and I'll just give some things to look out for. And unfortunately, your family member or your friend probably won't be receptive to help until they're ready to receive that help. But it can't hurt to take a look at the behaviors or take a look at your own behaviors and hopefully point them in the right direction or move yourself in the right direction. So, the first thing for me, um, if you've listened to this before, I used to play daily fantasy sports on DraftKings and FanDuel. It did not start out as a problem. Well before I played DraftKings and FanDuel, I played free fantasy on ESPN and with my best friend, Johnny Boy, who is I spoke with on an earlier episode on here, and hopefully I can get my buddy back on here again. Um, but for years I played it without an issue. Um, I always did pretty well in my season-long leagues. I was in a lot of the championship games. Always had some success. Um, but it really didn't become a problem until I started playing the daily fantasy. And one thing I realized was, looking back on it, was when I played season long with my friend John or on ESPN, that was strictly for fun. I wasn't doing it for any monetary gain. I wasn't trying to achieve some type of goal. I was just having fun with it. When I started playing daily fantasy sports, I started playing it because I was having financial difficulties and I thought that this was a solution for me. I thought that if I had won some large sum of money, this was going to fix whatever issues I was having at the time. So I would say if you're gambling and you see it as a financial solution, or I've heard people refer to it as a part time job or secondary income, that could be an indicator that you either have a gambling problem or you're on your way to potentially having a problem with gambling. Um, there are plenty of people out there that can gamble responsibly, gamble and have fun, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be for those people. It's just supposed to be fun. Um, I also believe that those people could eventually have an issue if they are doing it too much, but that's another issue. So if you're using your gambling as a solution, for me, I was hoping I could win some large sum of money to keep my family living in the area that we were living, um, on Long Island down here. And, I'm not going to go into detail again with this whole story. This is back in my first few episodes I talked about this, but I was seeing it as a financial um, solution. Uh, Secondly, I did not disclose to my wife that I was going to try this. I had a lot of self-esteem and self-worth issues, and I thought that if I had won some large sum of money, that this was going to have her and others see me in a better light as a better husband, a better father. Because at that time, I had my fatherhood and manhood come into question, or at least that's how I perceived it. And uh, it was all centered around money and what we had to do financially at that time. And I started equating a lot of my self worth to the amount of money I had, the amount of money I made. And so if you're assigning your self-worth and your value to yourself and to your family with financial um, success or the amount of money that you make, and that's why you're gambling. I would say that for me, that was definitely an indicator later on, as I've been in recovery, that was an issue. Um, so at the time, I didn't tell my wife. I thought if I could, I had this knowledge of sports. I had done so well in my season long leagues. I've talked about this before, but I thought I had the knowledge to hop on DraftKings and FanDuel and be successful. And even though I had some success over the years, I had a lot more failures and losses. So I didn't tell my wife. I kept it a secret. Basically, no one knew that this is what I was doing. So the further I got into it, the more that the losses stacked up. Now you're lying. Now you're holding on to these things. You're not telling your wife or your friends or your family that you are gambling, you are losing money. And then once that started to happen, I started trying to chase these losses. So if you're on a losing streak and you can't just stop and you find yourself unable to stop, convincing yourself over and over again that you have to go back and try to regain this money that you've lost, um, I would say that would be a primary indicator. For people who go into a casino, or like my friend John, he can put a little money on a game and win or lose, it doesn't matter to him. Um, but for me, I would lose and keep losing and feel like I needed to win that money back, or the losses piled up so much that I felt there was no way out of it unless I won this money back. And, at some point, I was racking up thousands of dollars in credit card debt, and I felt as if I didn't fix this on my own, if I didn't, um, you know, uh, pay these off, and my wife found out, then now on top of the self-worth and self-esteem issues I was already having, now I will be perceived as a liar and a loser and all these things, just all these things I would tell myself that I was, because I did not feel good about who I was back then. Um, so yeah, and another story I've told in the past is the first win I had, or first substantial win, wasn't actually with money. The first win I had was actually a trip to Los Angeles to go see the Clippers and the Nets play. So I basically had been entered into this contest because I had played a certain amount of money the month before on FanDuel, entered into that contest, and ended up winning that. Of course, I was very excited at first, had the feelings you get when you win a prize or you win a trip or you win a large amount of money. But once I realized that I couldn't be honest about this, that's the first time I really realized that this was an issue. I was no longer just trying to win money to better our lives. Now I had won something, but this wasn't, in my mind, what I was looking for. And I couldn't be honest about it. So I had to turn the trip down. Um, if you want to hear that story, that's back in the second episode of this podcast. Um, so if you're hiding your gambling, if you feel like you can't control your gambling, if you're noticing that you're playing more than you said you would, I can't tell you how many times I would put limits on my DraftKings account or on my FanDuel account, would hit that limit and keep going. Tell myself I'm only going to play $25 today or $50 today, and then go over that 5, 10 times the amount. And as it got closer to the end of my addiction, even more than that. Um, that's one thing I'd like to see change on DraftKings, is, if you're going to put a limit on yourself, that they actually cut you off at that point. Maybe it has changed in a year and a half. I don't know. But over and over again, I would go over my limits. Over and over again, I would go over the amount, I would say. The amount of times I would tell myself, I need to stop. I'm going to lose my family. I have to just stop and cut my losses at this point. But I would continue to go. I can't tell you how many times I would be, I'd lose again, or I'd have a long losing streak, or I'd lose, thousands more, or whatever it was. And I finally would say, that's it. I can't do this anymore. I'm at the end of my rope. I have to stop I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose my family. And then the next day, I'm fighting. I'm back and forth. My brain is wired towards addiction at this point. So now it's saying, just play again. This could be the day. This could be the day. But then the rational side of me saying, no, you can't do this. You're going to lose. And then basically, it's like two people fighting with yourself over and over and over again. And just having that constant battle in my mind. And at the end of the day, by 7 o'clock, say it was an NBA, I'd be giving in at like 6:50 and just going on hating myself, throwing a lineup in, building more lineups. Now, because of this, I haven't done my research, and I inevitably will end up losing. And just the constant battle back and forth. So I would say if you or a family member is constantly spending more time gambling or spending more money gambling, or say you've set a limit for yourself and you continually go over that, if you're not being honest about your winnings and your losses or the fact that you're gambling in the first place, these are all indicators that you may or someone else may have a gambling issue. At the same time, with all of that, that does not mean that there's something wrong with you. There's an issue that needs to be addressed and fixed. You're not a bad person. You're not, uh, most of us, at least, I can only speak for myself and the people I've met along the way, but most of us are really good people that just got caught up in an addiction, just like anyone who drinks too much or smokes too much weed or has gotten hooked onto drugs. Like, for whatever reason, we tried this substance or this activity or whatever you want to call it, and it just became too much for us. And it's just good to be able to recognize that these things are happening and seek out help and seek out recovery, because it can get better. You can get better. Life can get better. I'm over 18 months into this recovery journey, and my life has never been better. I feel better about myself than I've ever have been before. I feel like a success as a father and as a husband, and in so many areas of my life. I feel better than I've ever been. I'm fitter than I've ever been. I'm more talented at my guitar than I've ever been. So, life is good. Like, we don't always have to be stuck in this cycle of self-loathing, self-hatred, addiction. You're not a bad person. They're not a bad person. They can get help. There is help out there. There's also a lot of ways to get help. You don't only have to go into a program like GA, Gamblers Anonymous, but there are great tools in that. I've never been successful with the STEP method. For me, it was peer-to-peer online, recovery meetings, one-on-one therapy, which I found to be incredibly beneficial, and that's where I did a lot of the hard work. But GA has a great way of kind of assessing your potential, or if you have a gambling problem. So there's something they have called the 20 questions, and I'll read these off quick, and if you're not sure, just answer these as honestly as you can. And it says if you have over 7 of these, that you more than likely are a compulsive gambler or have a problem gambling. So the first one is, did you ever lose time from work or school due to gambling? The second one is, has gambling ever made your home life unhappy? 3, did gambling affect your reputation? 4, have you ever felt remorse after gambling? 5, did you ever gamble to get money with which to pay debts or otherwise solve financial difficulties? I mean, that one right there, boom. I mean, that was the reason I started gambling in the first place. 6, did gambling cause a decrease in your ambition or efficiency? 7, after losing, did you feel you must return as soon as possible and win back your losses? 8. After a win, did you have a strong urge to return and win more? 9. Did you often gamble until all your money was gone? 10. Did you ever borrow oh my God, I'm sorry, I can't even speak over here. Did you ever borrow to finance your gambling? 11. Have you ever sold anything to finance gambling? 12. Were you reluctant to use gambling money for normal expenditures? Basically saying this money that you've set aside for gambling or money that you've won, were you reluctant to use that for gas or for food or for anything else? 13. Did gambling make you careless of the welfare of yourself or your family? 14. Did you ever gamble longer than you had planned? 15. Have you ever gambled to escape worry, trouble, boredom, loneliness, grief, or loss? 16. Have you ever committed or considered committing an illegal act to finance gambling? 17. Did gambling cause you to have difficulty in sleeping? 18. Do arguments, disappointments, or frustrations create within you an urge to gamble? 19. Did you ever have an urge to celebrate any good fortune by a few hours of gambling? And 20. Have you ever considered self-destruction or suicide as a result of your gambling? Now, most of us answer well into the teens in these questions that have a gambling issue. I remember the first meeting I went to, I think I answered 14 of the 20 as a yes. And going over it again, I could easily say 16, 17. The only ones I really never considered self-harm or anything like that. I never committed any illegal acts, but I basically did most of the other things in this. And, from what I've come to learn is, this is just an assessment tool. This is a way to figure out if I have a gambling problem. Does your loved one have a gambling problem? And if they do, or if you do, be easy on yourself. It's not the end of the world. You can work back from this regardless of what your debt is, regardless of what your mind state is. I can tell you right now, 18 months ago, I never would have thought I'd be at this point now. I never would have thought I would be this happy, this healthy. Debts are paid off. Life is good, moving in a positive direction. I've never had my mental state as positive as it is at this point. I've never felt as good as I have. So I just want to encourage you that as bad as it may be right now, I promise it does get better. Just because you have a gambling addiction or an alcohol addiction does not mean you're a loser. Doesn't mean that you can't get better. Does not mean that you're not a good family man, wife, husband, brother, sister. You're just going through something right now, and the best thing to do is to come clean, ask for help. I give out some numbers at the end of this episode, every episode here, and I will be more than happy to point you in the right direction if you feel like you need some help, if you've answered yes to any of these or 7 or more of these questions, if you're even considering that you have an issue. But it does get better, I promise. Life does get better. But anyways, that is it for me on this episode here. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Be good to yourselves and each other.
Here's where to get help. You can call or text 1-800-522-4700. That's the National Council on Problem Gambling. Or you could call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-426-2537. This is where I found the link to my therapist through my local counselor. And then also, we cannot forget our affected others. My wife goes to Gam-Anon every week, and it's been a huge help to her. So anyone in your life who you feel like needs help or you've affected through your gambling, you can go to gamanon.org, GAM-ANON.org. The number is 718-352-1671.